Welcome to the Lynn Community Television Show. Here with me today, we have some of the organization leaders behind ECCO. ECCO is an acronym for Essex County Community Organization. And here with me today, we have Dr. Alexandra Pineros-Shields, we have Cherish Casey, and Rabbi Margie Klein-Ronkin. And we're here today to talk about racial justice. This organization is focused on this, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of their main focuses. But first and foremost, I'd love to give these guys an opportunity to explain who they are and how they're involved with the organization. Alexandra, we'll start with you.
Great. Thank you so much for having us on the show. Appreciate being here. So ECCO was founded about 30 years ago to organize people of faith, so mostly Christian and Jewish congregations in Essex County, to be able to live out their call in their faith traditions around social justice. We focus primarily on criminal justice reform, immigration reform, and economic justice. Some of our recent successes was working with a statewide coalition raise the minimum wage from $8 to $11. ECCO collected 22,000 signatures of registered voters for that effort. As part of that effort, we also were able to get sick days for all workers in the Commonwealth, regardless of whether you're full-time, temporary, part-time, seasonal. Everybody can now earn time towards being sick. And so those were two very big successes. And all our congregations, we are now up to 37 member congregations, and those congregations worked on collecting signatures. They are currently working on criminal justice reform and economic justice.
Wonderful. Now, Cherish, we talked a little bit before the program. Grassroots organizing is a big part of your role here. Can you kind of elaborate on that and give us some more detail?
Yes, I am the racial justice organizer for the Essex County Community Organization. And so what I do is I really connect with the Black churches here across Essex County. Right now, they're mainly in Lynn. And I really listen to and connect to and find leaders that are within the congregations and bring them into the organization, offer them a chance to the table of justice, and allow them to give them the power to tell their story and to connect that to the broader narrative of criminal justice and how we need to really come together and impact change in our communities across racial lines.
Wonderful. Rabbi Margie, we're used to having you on Ruach. You're a guest host here at LCTV regularly, but you're also a big part of this grassroots organizing, a little bit different from what Cherish does, but overall the same focus, the same goals. You guys are trying to achieve the same end result, which is justice. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So first of all, it's great to be back in this capacity. I am the director of Clergy Organizing and Leadership Development, and like you said, I also do grassroots organizing. A lot of my work is with clergy across Essex County. As a clergy person, I know that it can be easy to sort of get sucked into congregational life, and for many of us, the reason that we chose to become clergy is because we felt a sense of call by God or by our community to be a moral voice and to do work to create God's vision of the world. And so a lot of what we do is organize clergy what I do is to organize clergy to put out maybe a different message than what we get in the media, a message that says everyone matters, everyone deserves to have enough, everyone deserves second chances. And that means both speaking publicly, doing public actions and rituals, and then also having the clergy organize our own congregations. I also work as the white member of the staff. I work with white congregations across Essex County and really think about how to build relationships across race and class. We have people that are incredibly different from each other and might not ever meet each other, except maybe in a service interaction where maybe maybe a poor person or a person of color is, cleaning the home of a richer white person? How can we build those deeper relationships and make people understand that if we want to build the kind of community that we all want and that we believe God wants, that means we really need to listen to each other. And as white people, we need to realize that actually often, or privileged white people, that often people who are closer to the pain are really the ones that have the most experience and insight about what kind of future we want to create.
Sure. So very important stuff that we're talking about. I'm glad we're kind of opening up this conversation. It seems as though everybody's kind of against the ropes and they're really not willing to afford their opinions and, fear of maybe offending somebody. And it's really cool what you guys are doing. Very important service to the community. A big focus of what you guys are working on currently: criminal justice reform, policy reform, and economic justice. Alexandra, you talked a little bit about what we're doing for economic justice, raising the minimum wage. We're giving people the opportunity to, have sick days, earn time off, so that they actually feel as though they're a part of contribution to these organizations, whether they're part-time or full-time. Really cool stuff. So before the program, we talked a little bit about, your overall focus, what ECCO's all about. We talked a little bit more about what you guys are focused on working towards today. We're going to cover on all of these, but criminal justice reform legislation, Safe Communities Act. You guys talked about the Justice Reinvestment Act, building relationships with police officers, even getting more resources available into some of these jails that people who need these second chances deserve. So Alexandra, I'm just going to kick this off to you and allow you to kind of elaborate a little bit more on what you guys are trying to achieve right now. What are some of the continuous improvements that we can expect to see out of ECCO?
Yes. So let me highlight the current work that we are engaged in for human dignity. All our faith traditions talk about the poor and our responsibility to the poor and the working class, right? And so one of the things that we are engaged with is a statewide initiative called the Fair Share Amendment. And this is it would be a constitutional amendment that would make it possible to increase taxes on annual incomes over $1 million. Right now, our schools, Lynn is a great example, we need more money for our schools. Our roads and our bridges are in disrepair. Our public transportation system needs revenue as well. And so the Fair Share Amendment would increase taxes on annual income over $1 million, and that is not assets, only annual income. And then take that revenue, which would be about $1.2 billion per year, and put it straight into schools, roads, bridges, and public transportation. We think that that is a very beneficial way of helping the community. And so in order for that to pass, it has been a 4-year process. We started 3 years ago. We collected signatures, and then the last 2 springs we've had votes at the State House, and in both cases we were able to get 75% of the state legislature to vote, and we just succeeded in doing that. And so the final stage is in the fall of 2018. We are going to have a question on the ballot. Because we were able to get the signatures and the votes in the state legislature. So next, not this fall, but the following fall, we will be organizing in congregations and asking people to talk to their neighbors and inform and educate their neighbors about how important this revenue for the community. And so we want everybody to go out and vote. And one of the things we do also as a community service is register people to vote, because there's unfortunately, a lot of people who aren't registered to vote, and also people who are registered who don't vote. And this would be very important for a city like Lynn. So that's one of the things we're working on currently.
So just to follow up, I'm just curious, because I don't know much about the tax bracket, but let's say I make $1 million a year. What would be the percentage of my annual income, not assets, just annual income, that I would be paying now? And then in the future, if this bill passes, what would be that percentage in the future?
Yes. So currently, we have a flat tax. Everybody in the Commonwealth pays 4.2%. And so what we would like is for individuals who on a yearly basis make more than $1 million, the first $1 million will be taxed at 4.2% like everybody else, but anything above $1 million would be taxed at an additional 4%.
Okay, so if I made $1,001,001, that additional $100,000 would be taxed at an additional 4%.
Yes.
So 4% for the initial $1 million, and then 4% for the additional $100,000, if that were the case. I don't.
And
that'd be
there's
great.
8% would be a total of 8%.
Total 8% on $101 million.
on the one on the what's
4%
above.
on the million, 8% on the on the 100,000, 8% on the 100,000. Yeah.
Okay, so 80,000 out of, I'm not a mathematician. Is it 8,000? 8,000 out of 100,000? That'd be 8%? Yes.
And the estimate is that there is about 17,000 individuals in the Commonwealth which this would affect.
Okay, so what do you project, like, I mean, how much monies would this generate, knowing this information?
So the Internal Revenue Service has suggested that it would make $2 billion a year. But the folks running the campaign or have calculated that it would generate 1.2. So anywhere from 1.2 to $2 billion a year.
Wow. That could do a lot for roads and schools like we talked about. So Cherish, big part of grassroots organizing. Let's talk a little bit about your focus through ECCO. What are some of the impacts you're trying to make in your community?
Some of the impacts that we are definitely trying to make is building relationships with our local law enforcement. And it's really interesting how that started. And at first, when we tried to build relationships with our local law enforcement, we were talking about this broad narrative of policing that, and we're basically coming to our law enforcement and saying, you are biased, you are biased. And it wasn't until we came to our law enforcement and we said that we all hold some level of bias, and we need to discuss this, and we need to build relationships and have understandings of cross-cultural lines of each other, that we were able to hold an implicit bias training with our local law enforcement. And they specifically said, we allowed this to happen because you saw us as human beings. And so we were able to hold two successful implicit bias trainings with our local law enforcement, with community, and talk about how policing in our communities can affect our local citizens in terms of how police are viewing the citizens in terms of implicit bias. So this is a very, very important campaign within our community in terms of building relationships, because we need to change the perceptions of how law enforcement views the people that they are policing.
Can you just say what implicit bias is?
Implicit bias is how we view each other and our communities. And like, for example, we all hold some level of bias towards each other. Like, for instance, you may, like, even within the Black community, we may say, have bias in terms of, okay, I'm Black, you're Afro-Caribbean. So, or we may have bias in terms of how we view each other, a Black male, and just automatically assume that they are violent. So we need to understand how we are viewing one another.
Okay, so just a quick follow-up for you, Cherish, and I'm just interested to hear, because you had mentioned you had 2 successful meetings in which you kind of opened up a dialogue to generate relationship between citizens and police. What were some of the concerns of police officers, and what were some of the concerns of those citizens who attended?
Some of the concerns of the citizens were over-policing in communities and feeling like the police were just viewing them as violent citizens instead of seeing them as active citizens in their community that are actually productive citizens.
Okay. Now, police, what were some of their concerns?
Some of their concerns were that, sorry, I'm getting nervous.
That's okay. We can come back to you on that one.
Please
We'll let
do.
you collect your thoughts.
I just need to think a second.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Sure. Can I just jump in on that?
Absolutely.
So we kind of started the conversation post-Ferguson. There was a lot of tension in general in our country, between police and community, and particularly between police and the Black community, where the police felt attacked, they felt bullied, they felt like, listen, we're just doing our job, we're putting our lives on the line, and you're angry at us and telling us that we're being racist when we're just trying to do our jobs. And then the Black community was saying, hey, you're targeting us, look at the numbers. There are wildly disproportionate numbers of Black people getting arrested or getting pulled over compared to the percentage of the population. And what we were able to do through our implicit bias training was say, look, actually we're all biased. We've all been taught through TV and movies and the news to think kind of white people are good and Black people are scary. And we don't really think that. In our heads we know, like, okay, well, I should treat every person equally. But in that snap judgment, when your life is in danger, you might be more likely to think, oh, this white person is holding a cell phone and this Black person has a gun. And they've done all kinds of studies that show that, but that also show that when we're trained, when we start understanding what these preconceptions are that we've almost been programmed to have, we're actually able to change them. And we've seen that since doing this training, we've had a much deeper relationship with the police, so that when there was a tragic shooting that happened in the Black community in April, the relationship between the Black community and the police was really transformed, and there was a much closer communication, and at least from the perspective of the community, a great deal of respect.
So a lot of this this biasness that we're talking about, you believe is more is developed in what the media portrays to us as opposed to like individual experiences. I know that's a big part of the argument. A lot of people want to say that, you know, this is the experience that I've had and this is the way that I am today, as opposed to, you know, well, the media portrays this and that's why a lot of people may think this way.
You know, I think that in a certain sense it's hard to know, like, nurture versus nature kind of question, where I feel like it's like, to some degree it's the media, to some degree it's historical circumstances that have created a great deal of poverty or inequality. But whatever it is, the current situation may lead people to have assumptions that are not based on the current moment. So if I come into a room and I think you're good and you're bad, and I've never met either of you, it might be that I met 5 people before you that looked kind of like you that weren't nice to me. But it's still not fair if I wouldn't give you a chance. And so what we're trying to do is sort of say, look, we've all had the experiences that we've had, but we want to make sure that everyone, and especially people in power, are giving everyone a fair chance based on their own choices, not based on a broad picture. I also want to talk a little bit, if it's okay, about our statewide work for criminal justice reform. You know, all of our faith traditions, one of the big things that God asks us is to free the prisoners. And also there's a huge focus on forgiveness, redemption, and transformation. In our country, we actually incarcerate more at a higher rate than any other country in the entire world. It costs in Massachusetts $49,000 a person to house, to imprison someone, and it costs much less to educate them. And we have this pipeline where all, you know, particularly poor people and people of color wind up in our prison system. And so what we're trying to do through the Justice Reinvestment Act and bail reform is to say, let's try and find ways to reduce the number of people that are in prison and increase the opportunity for in prison and post-prison rehabilitative programming, and increase the training and opportunity for jobs when people get out of prison. Because right now there is a 60% recidivism rate in our state. What that means is that if you come out of jail, there's a 60% rate likelihood that you're going to just wind up right back in jail. And we as taxpayers are paying for that. Now, what would it be like if instead of that, we actually were investing in the people going into jail becoming better people, so that when they come out, they don't have sort of a lifetime sentence of being criminals or ex-prisoners, but we actually give them the opportunity to become productive members of society. And so that's what the Justice Reinvestment Act would do. And bail reform would mean that we actually assess, is a person who's going to jail before their trial, before they've been found guilty, are they actually a flight risk? Are they actually a danger to society? And if the answer to those two questions is no, then let's let them go home and be with their families.
Right.
Let's not make it so much less likely that they'll do well in their trial, which we know is true if people are in jail. But right now, 47% of the people in Middleton jail are there because of bail, and most of them are there simply because they cannot afford to pay the fee for bail, which makes it like a debtor's prison. And as people of faith, and even as people of conscience and common sense, that just seems wrong.
Yeah, I was reading about a story yesterday. There was a situation where a guy's bail was set to $1 million based on a gun charge because they weren't sure whether or not he was a flight risk. Be interested to follow up. I wish I had some more detail on that. We've got about a minute left in the program, and I just want to say thank you guys for coming on to the show. I'd like to keep the network open. I think this is some interesting subject matter we should bring back on the LCTV show. I want to talk to you guys a little bit about membership and how maybe you can start your own program here too at LCTV, which I think would be a benefit to what you guys are working to achieve. Members of ECCO, I want to say thank you to my guests for coming on to the program. Thank you to my crew for filming the show, and thank you for tuning in. That's it for the LCTV show from the LCTV location here on Union Street. I'm Sean Donahue, wishing you all the best. So, see, I mess up too.